Greetings, YouTube. Mandarin has decided to join us today. One of my subscribers, Jan Plua, asked a question about alchemy. And where is the dividing line for me between alchemy and chemistry? And I suppose, on a larger extent, where would the dividing line be between alchemy and true magic? So we know that in the real world, chemistry grew out of alchemy in the pursuit of trying to find formulas to make people immortal and the ability to turn lead to gold. That kind of research led to the science that we understand as chemistry. And it was probably one of the earlier herbalism and chemistry were some of the earlier things accomplished by humanity before we got into the more abstract levels of physics. And of course, as the joke goes, physicists like to let the chemists pretend they have a real school of thought, because at its base everything is physics. And again, the mathematicians just laugh at all of them. But so I got myself thinking about this, and I think that if I were to say use in like 3.5 or in Pathfinder, for me the difference is between real world chemical reactions and then mythical chemical reactions. For example, gunpowder is chemistry, but smoke powder, which is a magical version of it, is alchemy. It's not magical in the sense that it does something other than gunpowder, but it does it in a manner that doesn't use conventional chemistry. So for example, you want to introduce firearms to your world, but you don't want chemistry involved because you know that there are people in this world that know far more about the topic than you do and are going to find some way of using that against you and possibly ruining your campaign. So if you use smoke powder, which is an alchemical version of gunpowder, you can control its production simply by making it only producible by alchemists. So a really bright person that doesn't have a skill in alchemy can't produce it. Then you've bottlenecked the whole thing, so you're much less likely to have mass production and have armies, with firearms. They're always going to be a small number. They're going to be special forces, personal guards, special military units, things like that, adventuring parties, but they're very unlikely to ever become mass production unless your game really goes into a alchemical, magical version of an industrial revolution, which is quite possible. But if you're doing the kind of cusp between the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, if you're dancing on that edge, you can always keep that low and controlled. And that's the kind of thing I like to use, using smoke powder, which is a magical or alchemical version of gunpowder. And I'll have to admit, it's a very fuzzy line in either direction. Because you could be thinking, well, you just described something that can happen in the real world, but you made a version of it that can't, so that you can control its production. So I'm replacing something as opposed to just out and out saying that thing is really different. I'm producing the same response, the same action, which is an explosion driving a piece of lead down a barrel, but I'm doing it in a way that lets me have greater control. For example, one thing I used in one campaign was that dragon dung had to be the source of the nitrite in the smoke powder, so that limited its production. And eventually the dragons figured this out, so they knew that they had a commodity that other people wanted to purchase. So again, you create some interesting economic and social structures through this process. But it's fuzzy. Where is a first level or spell different from alchemy? And is alchemy and, say, cantrips or orisons very similar to each other? And I think it is. So I think that orisons and cantrips are a decent model of the kind of things that alchemy can do on a basis that you could then hand to someone else. So while a spellcaster can cast cantrips and orisons pretty much at will, as long as they know them, they can't hand them to someone else. Well, an alchemist can. He can produce a concoction or a pill or whatever. Depends on how you want to do it. A wafer. There's lots of ways of getting around it. Or it could even be alchemy in the sense that it's a small charm you snap in half. It's something that's used once. A potion, essentially. So you're handing something to someone else that lets them use a magical ability, even though they themselves do not possess that magical ability. Um, so it is a difficult line to really define, I think, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with saying this is and that isn't, because there aren't a huge number of chemical products in Pathfinder, for example. There are a lot, but they're not. It's not as many spells. In fact, there are probably way too many spells in Pathfinder. There are way too many things in Pathfinder. I've often said that the diversity of Pathfinder is both a blessing and a curse. Um, and I don't actually know many games other than Pathfinder that have really unusual or unique alchemical mechanics. So in this regard, I'm asking you folks to help me. Can we help Jan find systems that are really good at alchemy? I know that alchemy played a role in Talislanta, but it's been so long since I read the system, I can't tell you what role it played. And they had a different take when it came to classes and races and things like that. Um, so maybe Talislanta has what you're looking for. And I don't have any memory of. I know I've read BRP and I've so it's and Harp, but I don't know how they relate to alchemy. I just don't remember. So if anyone could tell me how they do, and are there mechanics unique enough to really make it worth someone's time to read them if they were trying to come up with their own alchemical system. So let's discuss alchemy, how you use it, and how you define it. Again, it's fuzzy in my head, and I can't pin it down exactly, but it is there. And I guess it's one of those things with the old joke about pornography. I can't define it, but I know it when I see it. So maybe I understand. I recognize alchemy, but necessarily can't define it as clearly as I'd like to. So folks, in the comments below, let's discuss alchemy.